thinks it's much, much, much lighter, but I got a burn going. But if I wanted to get darker, I just slow it down a little or go back over it and just keep building the color, the pencil marks up. I do like doing the trees because after all, we burn wood, and so they do lend themselves quite well to doing trees on this here. I have done people. I did my carving teacher. I did a photo of her. Unfortunately, she died before I could give it to her, so I gave it to her oldest daughter. Finishes that I do, I use Deft semi-gloss. When you compete, they don't want it really glossy because gloss makes your grain come up. And if you've got a piece where you're struggling, which I once had happen with some elephants on a basswood box that had grain like you wouldn't believe, I had to do a matte finish on it because if I put even a semi-gloss, they would look like zebras pretending to be elephants or elephants pretending to be zebras, I don't know which. And so I use a semi-gloss generally. But I also have a habit of getting a spray UV protectant matte, spray that down, then go over with it with the Deft because the Deft that I have is not UV. And then put a couple layers of wax. And then I can buff up the wax when I go to shows and things. They're able to see the grain. That's what the judges want to see. They want to see how I handled the grain if there was grain there. And that gloss distorts it. So I was in a competition and my daughter was doing her first competition and she had this piece that she did, I know it sounds weird, those little dragon lizards, and it was just a face thing. Her biology teacher had this pet, and so my daughter took this really bad picture they had of this dragon, and she did it, and I mean, you swear that those were real scales. You touched them, they felt like scales from her burning. And she beat out a gal that did this beautiful African scene and stuff like this with this real shiny, 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 shiny finish because people bought them. They liked that glossy. And she couldn't understand why my daughter had beat her. She wasn't being mean about it or anything. She was, she just wanted to know what she do wrong. And when she sells this stuff, but she can't beat a 16, 17-year-old girl that was only like maybe her third, fourth piece of burning. And they said, your gloss may sell, but we can't see what you've done, and you've got glass on top of it as well, and we can't see how you work with the grain. We can't see if there was grain in there, if you had to deal with it, and you solved the problem. So it was kind of a lesson for us. I mean, I had just always done what I did, and I just didn't put the glass in until, later, or if people wanted it. So if people want to compete, don't put glass on it, and don't put a shiny finish.
There's a whole world of competitive wood burning?
Usually it's in the wood carving shows. Most of them only have one. We're kind of special. Most of them only have one category. We have 4 or 5 now. It started out as 3. And that's good because it's like you have all these beautiful different things going on, and it's just like that beautiful piece that he carved that is stylized competing against a bust, a very well done bust that's detailed. I mean, it's really hard to compare them because they're such different styles. So there is that same thing for us. It's a lot of it. It's a case of subject matter. I need to make that darker in here. Shade it with this. Bring in some shadow.
Barb, how do you prep the wood first?
Oh yeah, the smoother it is, the better your pen's going to glide over it. If it is rough, you're going to have it burning rough, and you'll have dots that are burned and dots that are empty and haven't been burned. So I usually start with like an 80 to 100, 150, and just get all the rough stuff down. And then I go back in, and then I use 250, and then I like to go in with 400. I want it as smooth as I can. I find that works really well. Of course, with paper, you wouldn't have to sand any of that, or you wouldn't have any paper. But I know some people don't, they stop at the 250, and that's okay, but don't be surprised if it doesn't look as nice as you would like it to be.
I did some laser burning
That's cheating.
I want to cheat with this. Have you any experience with touching up the laser burning with the,
I've never done laser burning.
haven't?
No, I was at one of the shows you guys had. They had all the tools and things. There was that guy with that big, huge laser burning deal like that, and I'm just looking at it going, and they're all exactly the same. Everyone after the initial piece is first created. Every one of these, I could burn this tree and that tree a gazillion times. Each one's going to be a little bit different because I'm never going to quite get the same thing. So I just say it's cheating. It's like in the carving world, it's the hand carvers versus the rotary. You know, they say it's cheating, and we're like, no, not necessarily, because I do a little bit of both. Sometimes you can't get in with it on a hand tool. This is like I said.
Do you start at the edges and then come back into shade, or?
You can do whatever you want. I just happen to, because I'm doing the side that's kind of dark, I can go darker so you can see it. I could also start in here and I can start it over here and done very, very light and just work my way over. This particular pen, I'm going to, because what you're seeing is basic shading and it is faster. My first piece other than that one there, because Sheila Hunter does it as stippling. That's how she does all of hers. And that means you dot, 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 dot. And I had an 8x10 that I did that was, I really loved the piece. And it took Best of Show in a Fine Art. And it took 40 hours, an 8x10. It was stone. And it was from down at the bottom where the creek was, and you were looking up the stone stairs, and they were older stones, and they were covered with dirt, and things were growing where they shouldn't, so you had weeds and grasses growing. It was such a cool thing, and you could see up over there, and there was a little amphitheater, which was just basically it was at Martha Lafitte Nature Sanctuary, a little open area where there were some benches. The benches are in there, and then there's all these trees. So I did that. And then it washed away. I took a photo of it actually before I burned it, and it washed away that fall. So I actually burned it. And they did retrieve all the bricks. They didn't get very far, but it tore everything apart, and now it's all new looking and stuff because there's no dirt and weeds and stuff that made it interesting. But you could do it. I could do this tree just by stippling, but it's going to take longer. And the thing with stippling is, you could turn up the temperature. But to get a shading, to have a gradual, and I'm going to turn it down just a little, have a gradual from going from lighter to darker, you just have to also put them closer together. That's all it is with it, is how far apart those dark dots are. I should have brought one of my pieces that is almost all stippling.
The one that's down below, how many hours did that take?
Now that one I didn't actually keep track of the hours. I don't think it was 40. I would say probably 30 because I used a shader. But I had a lot of detail in there, and because you can't erase, if you make a mistake, you have two options. Sanding, and what happens when you sand? You're sanding burned areas. All the carbon goes into all the places all around, and so now you've got smudgy, dirty looking wood. The other is to scrape it. Now that will make divots. You have to be very careful. So again, don't use the really glossy stuff because the judges would see that divot. But if you use the other, you don't notice it. And so I actually have little X-Acto knives that I do that with. And sometimes I'll do a little bit of sanding if I want to maybe lighten it a little. And I use these tools because I can go to a new fresh one. I can do a little line, or I can do a heavier area. I like those. But mostly I learned to scrape very well, or not make the errors to begin with. Or work it, yes. That's the other thing. And I don't, and this is something that Fern told me, and I heartily agree with her. Don't ever tell somebody where your mistakes are. 99.5% of people will not know. I have a piece, and it wasn't a mistake, but they had, it was a big piece, which is fun. It's hard to find a nice big piece to work with. And it had apparently a knot hole, and they had cut out in the same shape a nice piece and apparently glued it in. So you can see the little circle on here. Nobody can find it. They're looking all, it's actually up in the sky area. But I worked all my trees in such a way, and the branches and stuff, you can't see it. And nobody knows it's there but me. And even I can't find it anymore because it's been so long. But you can see I can get that same darker, and I can just keep going in here darker and darker and then make it look more. It does give a good texture. I love to use this for stone, this dotting. I love to use it for rocks because, you know, you can get some really rough rocks. And actually you can use it for skin. You can use a combo of this and the shading, with it, light shading. Now, one other thing.